Hello and welcome to the Product Opscast with Graham Reed and Antonia Landy. Welcome, Antonia, this morning. How are you today?
I am freezing cold, but I'm fine, thank you, Graham.
Yes, I noticed that as I came into my office this morning as well. Today, we are joined by my friend Pippa Topp, CPO at telecommunications company giffgaff. You probably know them if you are in the UK, possibly not elsewhere, and a fabulous product consultant. Pippa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Pippa Topp. When I get asked what do I do, I never quite know the answer. I always find myself saying, I'll do anything for money to do with product. Pretty much it. So as you already said, I'm the interim CPO at giffgaff. I also coach product leaders. That's separate to that. And then I consult as and when anyone needs me. But I also am the founding CPO at Molo, which is a startup around parenting app and trying to relieve the mental load for parents. So busy is is probably the easiest summary. But no, it's all good. I've been in product and tech. I like to just say 15 years to keep everyone guessing about my age, but it's going to be 15 years forever now that I've done a whole range of things, from being the product manager on the UK's first smart boiler to working in educational technology, which Graham's where we met when I was at TES. I worked at Gumtree when it was part of eBay, and then I've worked in smaller scale up startups and done interim work. So interim CPO for giffgaff. I was an interim product director at Charlotte Tilbury for a while. So a real mix, I think it's fair to say.
And you've stolen the next piece of that, which about 15 years ago is the first time we actually met, when we were both working in the education sector. So it's a really, really lovely story to, we did that. We kind of lost touch for a better part of a decade. And then kind of, over the last couple of years, we've reconnected. So really lovely to talk about. So today we are going to talk about an incredible topic, which is emotional intelligence in product leadership, and in product teams as well. So I hope everybody on the audience is ready for this one. I'd like to really just kick off, Pippa, with emotional intelligence for people that may not really kind of know what this is all about. Tell us.
Well, emotional intelligence is really understanding people better, but first and foremost, understanding yourself better. So it's the awareness and understanding of yourself in terms of your strengths, weaknesses, needs, drivers. But it's also then taking that understanding into a space where you can then manage yourself accordingly, and then extending that understanding to see how other people's behavior influences your emotions, but it also influences how team dynamics work, how people collaborate together. And then that understanding can lead you to be able to help manage those situations as well. So if I apply it to a product scenario, if I think about how I was many years, let's say 15 years ago, I might be sitting in a steering group meeting and getting asked loads and loads of questions about my product. And I'd start feeling really defensive. And so my behavior I'd get kind of short and snappy, and maybe I'd feel quite flustered, and maybe I'd feel maybe a bit angry, and lots of different emotions would come up. And my behavior outwardly would show that I maybe wasn't together. And then if I fast forward to now, if I find myself being hammered with loads of questions in those sort of high pressure situations, I'm able to lean more into curiosity. I recognize the defensiveness, and I'm able to go, oh, why am I feeling defensive? I'm feeling defensive because maybe I don't know the answer to this question, or maybe I'm feeling defensive because I'm assuming an intention from someone else. So I'm able to start applying my own self awareness that I'm perhaps making up a little story in my head that this person's trying to catch me out, rather than going, oh, that's a really interesting question. Can you help me understand what you mean by that, so that I can give you the best possible answer? So that's kind of emotional intelligence from what it is, and then how it can show up for you in product.
Yeah, I absolutely love this, right? Because so often, and I think I say this in nearly every talk on product ops I've ever done, but in order to affect meaningful change in an organization, you need to understand people where they're at. And a lot of the time, we do deal with some of that defensiveness or maybe prickliness. And instead of that in turn making you as a product ops person defensive and going, well, just do it. Like, just trust me enough to like do this, right? I always tell my coachees and everybody I work with, like, understand where that prickliness comes from, why that is there in the first place, why there is maybe that knee-jerk reaction from the people in the product team to say, I categorically reject everything you put on my plate, right? And I think it's such a human to human role, product operations, and it requires that attunement and refinement to other people's emotions to really understand, is it defensiveness because I'm taking something away that they maybe feel very passionate about? Is it defensiveness because maybe they feel like I'm implying what they've done so far isn't good enough? Right? And I think there's so many emotions at play when we talk about organizational change. So I think I'm just so excited that we're actually talking about this.
Yeah, I think there's something else there, and as you were talking about other, like somebody else
Right.
I defensive, but in order for us to be able to calmly respond to someone's defensiveness, we've got to be in sort of full control of our behaviors as
Absolutely.
well. Because it's not like we're gonna not feel feelings, though those feelings are gonna be there. It's about then how do we respond to those feelings? And so it's just sort of layer upon layer of understanding that kind of goes back and forth, which I just find it fascinating.
I think this is again absolutely fantastic topic. You was telling your story kind of from about 15 years ago. I'm looking at myself about 5 years ago and was acting very much the same as well. Would feel myself getting very defensive. And Tony, you and I every episode, I think, of this, we talk about this absolutely, and it's a worthwhile thing about this being a very people to people role. I still find myself today, occasionally kind of just falling into that same trap of like, well, hang on, what's going on here? So how does a team kind of evolve, in that kind of sphere? So what I'm talking about here is if we are being, emotionally intelligent, we are aware of our emotions. But others are not. Others are the ones that are, are bombarding us, are getting very defensive, are getting prickly when they're talking to us about things that we're doing. So what's some things that we can kind of do here when it appears that kind of not everybody is as emotionally intelligent as one would hope?
I'm laughing because I don't think it's like you reach emotionally intelligent enlightenment and then you're done. The difference is now you're aware of it. You are aware of when you're sliding into the defensiveness because it doesn't go away. And it's not just defensiveness. If I think about probably what something that sort of plagues me the most is more an anxiety that I'm not doing a good enough job or other people aren't thinking I'm good enough at what I'm doing. So it can be a whole myriad of things. I think defensiveness is a good example of one. And if I think about then what you just said, around, okay, how do we affect the team? It can only start with ourselves being aware. And it's not like, I'm fine now and you guys need to change. It's more like, I am aware, so I'm going to help hold a mirror up to everybody else. And I can share how difficult I find things. It's obviously easier as a leader to be able to start to affect change of that sort of those behaviors because you've got more say and you've got more weight. Obviously, if you're an IC, it's trickier because your circle of influence is much smaller. That said, I think in any team scenario, be it peer to peer in a squad or from, top down or bottom up or whichever way you want to look at it, that role modeling of behavior can come out in conversation when you're the one having the chat with someone and they appear to be defensive. You can then ask questions to sort of say, what's going on here? Like what's I notice that you feel quite uncomfortable with that. Can you help me understand what you're telling yourself or what's going on in this scenario for you? Or maybe I'm missing some context because the way I read this situation is this, and maybe there's something I'm not seeing. So curiosity and understanding where the other person is coming from. I think when you're managing it from a team setting where you're like an observer between two people, I had a scenario not long ago where I was running a workshop and it was different disciplines in the room, and we'd got into trios, and each person was to share what they needed from other people to do the best they could in their role, and what they expected from themselves to do the best they could in their role. And one person was sharing it and said, and for this I need X, and for that I need Y. And one of the other people in the group said, oh, well, that's the same thing, and was quite dismissive of it. And I said, or we can ask, that's interesting. Why do you say those two things? They sound quite similar. So help me understand more. And it's like a really small thing, but it's starting to give people space to express that there's actually complexity there that we can sometimes skip and jump to conclusions of. Because it is very easy to sort of sit on a high horse and go, well, I don't need to change. It's everybody else. But actually, if we think about it, it's also trying to have this awareness of what might I be doing that could cause this person to feel defensive or insecure or nervous, or maybe they don't feel safe. And I think psychological safety ties in hugely to all of this, because especially as a leader, that role modeling is trying to demonstrate, actually, we all recognize we're messy humans and we're not going to get it right all the time, and that's okay. But what I need from you is to express what's going on so that I can help resolve this situation or coach or guide you in whatever way you need.
It's funny, you took the question right out of my mouth. How much of this is quote unquote just psychological safety?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Psychological safety. Because I think, because when I was writing the talk Pockets of Brilliance, which I first did at Mind the Product a few years ago, I wanted to talk about psychological safety, but it's a really slippery one because it's tricky to scale psychological safety. Because if you think about the sort of a one-on-one relationship, you can establish psychological safety very quickly. One-on-two, easy enough. As that goes more and more, and then you add layers because you've got dynamics between the other people that you're not involved in, you can't force other people to have psychological safety. And this comes back to that point I was making before of, as a leader, it's probably the best position to be in to create a sense of psychological safety, because you're setting the rules. So you're saying, this is how we behave. And if you don't behave in that way, there will be consequences. And I'm standing firm. And that's really hard to do. So that scaling of psychological safety is really challenging. I think you have to set your expectations really clearly when you're not just when you're asking for someone to do something for you, be it, please can you go and get this information for me, or come and create this deck or play this back. There's clarity in what you ask for. And then there's the expectation setting in terms of behaviors, and what do I expect the behaviors to be for our organization? And then operationalizing those behaviors so that we understand how we can evaluate ourselves against them, so that it doesn't so much become anecdotal of they're just not very XYZ. It's actually they don't live up to the behaviors, or they're not demonstrating these behaviors, or they're explicitly going outside of those behaviors, and that is damaging me, the team, whatever it is, performance. Yeah, I don't know if that's a neat enough answer, but it's a kind of tricky one, I suppose.
Well,
I
I
don't
mean,
think
psychological safety is not a neat thing, right? And I think just declaring, even as a leader, yes, this is a psychologically safe environment isn't enough, right? It's really about modeling those behavior. And like you say, that the fact that there are consequences for not living up to that behavior.
And I think as well, being, especially as a leader, recognizing if you want that psychological safety, you're also going to have to put up with people coming back and challenging you on your own behaviors, which is possibly the most annoying and difficult thing about
I think there's, I think that that whole piece on role modeling is so important. And I think, as I said on an earlier episode, my team and my leadership at where I'm at the moment at Helios, we've just been doing some psychological safety training for leaders, which has been eye opening. And one of the things that we went in with this long before we had the training was we're quite we're quite happy to admit we didn't know what good looks like. We want to know, we want to learn, we want to do better. But we openly said to our teams, but we're not sure. We don't know exactly what good should be looking like and how we can then help you to then go get in that training. So that role modeling is important. It is important for the team. It is, I believe, also an extra tax on yourself as well, because you're wanting to do something that may well not be totally 100% comfortable for you, as you're still learning how to act in a certain way or act better. But also, like, exactly as you said, you're going to then get challenged and pushed back upon by those that have either not had the training or are not necessarily emotionally intelligent enough yet to be able to absorb what's happening. I think as well, it is so important to call out that it is absolutely fine. You don't have to get it right all of the time. Everybody everybody from those ICs to the leaders, you will not get it right all of the time. And I think that's important to recognize and to a degree not beat yourself up about it. If you recognize, as we were saying earlier, that you still have those lapses, you still fall into those same traps and things like that. Okay, and that's a lesson and that's something to learn from. But that doesn't mean that you are doing bad. That's just part of that learning process.
Yeah, it's really vulnerable work, trying to shift a team culture to be psychologically safe and emotionally intelligent. And the starting point in my whole journey into sort of really embracing this type of leadership and wanting to learn more, and it's something I've always been interested in. And then I was trying to remember earlier if it's 2018 or 2019, I can't remember, but there was a Netflix special of Brene Brown called Call to Courage, and I hadn't come across Brene Brown before then, and I sat down to watch it when I was, to say stressed is a massive understatement, and I was working really hard, but I didn't feel I was getting back what I was putting in. And I felt so anxious because I was trying to lead my team. I was an IC, but I was trying to lead my team in a way that I felt was very authentically me and psychologically safe and emotionally intelligent. But what it was leading me to was feeling incredibly vulnerable. And because I didn't necessarily believe in myself hugely, it led to this anxiety. And I sat down and this just happened. It's, algorithms are magic, aren't they? Just sometimes serve you the right thing. And I put this Brene Brown thing on. And in the first couple of minutes, she references a TED talk she did, which apparently is like one of the most watched TED talks. So I went and watched the TED talk and then I came back to the special. And what I took away from it was she quotes, God, I'm going to need to figure out who she quotes, but it's about it's not the critic who counts. It's basically the person who stands in the arena, which means if you're taking part and you're doing things and you're actively trying to make a difference, you can't listen to the criticism of the people who just sit back and just let you. It's very easy to sit up in the stall, up in the gallery, and just sort of throw rotten vegetables at the person who's taking the risks. But actually, that's the courage you have to take, is that you're doing the hard work and you're trying to make things better. And that vulnerability is essential, but you've also got to address that anxiety in there as well. So it's all these layers of it is taxing. It is really challenging. And that sort of opened me up to a whole kind of renewed energy to, yes, now I am on the right track. I need to figure out how to do this. That then led me down like a whole other rabbit hole, right? And I mean, you can never talk to me without me referencing Brene Brown. I mean, I have her Dare to Lead book I mean, it's got loads of different like annotations in it, which got me onto this role or this on this path around, okay, so how do I not only make sure I'm okay, but how do I start role modeling this for others? And what does that look like in practice? And what do I need to watch in myself that I'm perhaps not very good at?
I love this. I'm actually so glad we are talking about, you know, being in a position of leadership, whether you are still an IC, whether you're a leader by hierarchy, and how to do that authentically, but also how to deal with that kind of anxiety it almost inherently fosters. I think when I stepped into my first product ops leadership role, my way of combating this was to just model what the other leaders were doing. And I was receiving a lot of feedback and absorbing a lot of that. It's like, oh, well, this person has been a leader for 20 years. I should listen to them. Like they clearly know what they're doing. But I think halfway through that process, I realized they're a certain kind of leader and that's fantastic and it clearly works for them. But that's maybe not necessarily the kind of leader I wanted to become or I wanted to be. And I think that act of self-discovery, I think it was quite anxiety inducing, but then also having to find that confidence of saying my way of approaching this is as legitimate.
Mhm.
And, I feel like I can show up authentically in a certain way that maybe hadn't been done in a given organization before. But that's if I am to be a leader, then that's what I need to do
Yeah.
that with conviction.
Yeah, absolutely. That self-discovery piece. And that's kind of when people come to me for coaching and I say, what is it you'd like to get out of coaching? And they'll say usually two things. They say, well, I don't just want to coach, I kind of want a bit of mentoring as well in the leadership space. So I kind of want to know with a sounding board for the day to day. And then the other thing is always, and I want to grow confidence in who I am as a leader and get that sort of authentic leadership piece, but I don't really know what that means. And the answer usually lies is if we focus on the authentic leadership piece and who you are, you'll find the other stuff a lot easier to handle. And so the path we always go on is I start by saying, okay, tell me your story, which is basically tell me your life story. And let's start mapping out the patterns and the themes that come up, because it always surprises me how little we spend reflecting on what's got us to where we are. And actually, there were little seeds of sort of hints and clues along the way about what our natural tendencies are. And going through that, you can start to really see, oh, what are my values? What are the core things that help me make decisions, that guide me through those big decisions that we have to decide in life? And really, even if you haven't explicitly written it down, often it's quite innate and that you feel it before you even have put a word to it, because you're like, this doesn't feel right. What I'm doing doesn't sit right with me. And that's usually a good indicator that, well, hang on a second, this isn't me living to my values. I'm not being my authentic self. And I think some people get put off by the word authentic leadership, which I get because it can feel a bit fluffy and a bit sort of cheesy or whatever. But ultimately what it means is, who are you when you're at your best, and how can you give yourself some tools to help you be at your best in a sustained way? So that authentic leadership piece is really, how do I get to know myself in a way that means that I can confidently walk into things, not feeling I have to know all the answers, but know I can handle whatever life throws at me. And that has also led me to do a recent talk actually around self-belief, because I think when people talk a lot about like imposter syndrome and sort of burnout and things, I come back to, is it imposter syndrome, or is it we haven't taken the time to sort of shore up who we are? So it's not like there's no expectation that you should know exactly how to do the job if it's the first leadership role you've stepped into. So of course you're going to be feeling like you don't know what you're doing, because you probably don't know what you're doing, but you are perfectly capable of learning how to do it. And we've all been there, right? We've all gone into the roles where we've gone, holy shit, I don't know what I'm doing. But we're all still here. We're all figuring it out. And, look back over the past 5 years, life has taken some very unexpected turns, but we will survive. We can sort of dig into ourselves and know that we can persevere on these things. And I kind of think that for me is I don't know, I get quite excited about that.
Can I, just on that thread, and I want to ask a question as playing devil's advocate, because I absolutely do not believe this, but I think it's a piece that's worth calling out. We are in a time in late 2025 where, there is huge amount of pressure on products to deliver. There is still uncertainty in the tech market in jobs, particularly leadership roles, are much fewer and far between than they ever were. So there is an inherent expectation to be, well, come in, hit the ground running. You haven't got time to think. You've just got to kind of turn everything around. So to do some of these things about kind of, to a degree, putting your mark on your team and your division, set out what you want to see happen, particularly from a people perspective, not just this is what we're going to build perspective. What is the thought process here, in saying this is what we should be focusing on, as opposed to business owners and other leaders that are saying, no, just come in and this is exactly what I want you to do, and you've just got to get the shit out the door, etc., etc.
Are you saying to bring emotionally intelligent leadership into an organization, there may be a perception that that's taking focus away from the doing work?
Yes. Or is literally just not a priority for some businesses. They just want stuff to happen. They don't care how it happens. How would you look at working with leaders that may kind of think that way?
I think if we think about the impact over the doing, so how do I get a product team working at their best and start making decisions that are impactful and moving things towards that impact? It is getting them confident to make decisions and confident to move quickly. Because if you're not helping them build that confidence and autonomy, you're becoming the person who has to make all the decisions, and then you become the bottleneck. So my argument would be okay, I can do that, but we could potentially risk slowing everyone down, disengaging lots of people. They'll either burn out or leave. It will be really tricky to hire because my reputation then is based on, she's a dictator and she'll work you really hard. So that would put people off. And there's not that, my belief is that I don't think you can get that same lasting, sustainable impact. You can get impact. Like, don't get me wrong, I've challenged myself on this as well, because I kind of think, I spout the virtues of emotional intelligence and authentic leadership, but there are plenty of companies doing very well without that. So the other side of me is just like, well, I wouldn't work there. And I know that's not always everyone's choice. Like, they have those options. But if I can, I will not work for that because it doesn't sit with my values. So if I think about what my values are, the sort of two strongest ones that come up time and time again for me are generosity and courage. And if I can't bring those to an organization, then then I'm not going to be impactful. So if your values may be more around, I don't know, like excellence, there might, and determination, let's say, that might, and you were surrounded by other people whose values were similar, then that actually might be a thriving organization for you to work in, because you can bring your authentic leadership and hold the bar really high, and everyone in the team is really behind that because they too are perhaps not too I don't know, on that. I don't know if you've ever come across the insights profiles, and you're kind of given different colors, like yellow,
Yes.
red, green, blue. And yellow is very sort of inspiring, motivational. Blue is very detail driven. Red is direct, like directional, like director, and green is more caring. if you've got lots of yellows, and I'm very yellow, and you've got a whole team of blue, my style probably won't work with that team anyway. So it would be, I'm not saying there's not benefit to the behaviors. I still think they hold true, but I think it's also about aligning who you are with the company, and does that fit with what you're trying to achieve? And it all comes together to be as impactful as you can.
Very interesting. Insights profiles, I've still got mine from 20 years ago. I'm very blue as well. I'm very much in the blue camp, very logical and data and et cetera, et cetera. Very, very interesting. Antonio, anything you want to pick up on this topic?
I would actually love to ask you, Pippa, because I think this is actually something that's happened quite a few times in my career where I was the odd one out. So it happened, I think, the first time I was hired by a fairly traditional B2B SaaS company that was very, like I say, a bit traditional, fairly German in their attitude, I'll say. And I was explicitly taken in because I had more of a startup background and they wanted to be a little bit more, agile, a little bit more modern. And how do you thrive if you're not that majority? If you're, let's say, an entirely different color.
How do you thrive? How do you thrive? Well, where my brain is going is if I think about when I was an IC and a PM, and it was me, shiny yellow, in with lots of engineers who are more blue, let's say. And listen, just for the purpose of this, I am sweeping generalizations are happening here. I recognize not all PMs are like me, and not all engineers are introverted blues, but let's just play the game for a moment. I still could find huge amounts of joy in the work and connection with people, even who aren't like me, because beyond the values, I can still connect with people because of a level of curiosity I have to sort of build empathy to others. So understanding other people's motivations and who they are and the work. Even in the most awful organizations, I've always found relationships where I've built and sort of enjoyed cultivating smaller groups where I can share ideas or sort of get that sounding board stuff back. So, but interesting, you used the word thrive. So did I think I was thriving there? I think the reality is I wasn't thriving there.
Hmm.
I can still do good work. I can still find little pockets of brilliance, little areas where I'm having an impact. But to really thrive, I need to find an organization and a broader team that I feel brings out the best in me and I can bring out the best in them. So I don't know if that can be a long-term thing where you stay in one place for a very long time and expect to thrive. I think you can survive and you can be fine and you can do good work and you can build some good relationships. But I think if we examine the word thrive, where we're having the biggest impact and we feel like we're truly ourselves and we're really shining, then I think you need a few other pieces to be in place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I actually agree. I think for that thriving to happen, you would really need explicit curiosity on both parts to really approach each deviation, let's say, from a place of curiosity and a place of, well, let's learn from each other and let's, combine forces to have a greater whole, right, than the sum of its parts. But I think ultimately it's definitely challenging, right? Because again, you're going back to this idea of value and what the organization has valued up until a given point and what your own values are as a new addition and how those values might change or adapt when you're in that mix altogether. It's interesting because I think it's something that, especially in product ops, I feel like a lot of folks struggle with, and to a certain extent that value misalignment, that mismatch can cause failed product ops teams implementations. So I'm happy we're talking about it explicitly because at the end of the day, if you've been taken into a transformative role, your role has been sold, to the rest of the team as a assisting role, That's very clearly a mismatch in how you will approach bigger strategic topics or how people will interact with your suggestions or your additions to the team.
You're touching on something here which is really close to my heart. I'm often coming in to transform something. It doesn't have to be a product operating model transformation or a digital, it can just be you're brought in to make a change. And when you are brought in and you have been told you are making this change, well, I can only speak for myself, but I know I take that on with a huge amount of responsibility. And I think this is not only important to the business, but this is important to me personally, because it will either reinforce or undermine my reputation as what I can do. To your point of you've kind of been sold a role of what you're transforming, but you're not then given the support and the freedom and the decision-making capability to actually enforce that change, then what has happened to me is, going back to what I was saying earlier, that anxiety starts to build because you're thinking, but I was brought in to do this thing and I need to do this thing. And my worth, and this is where it sort of all starts going a bit wrong, I've attached my worth to this thing without acknowledging that it is not solely my responsibility to do this. And to be successful, lots of other people need to play their part as well. And again, this comes back to this self-belief. If you haven't built a really strong foundation of self-belief to know that I am doing the best I can, and that may not be good enough, and that's okay. If you haven't built that, then what you're at risk of doing is saying, actually, my whole personal self-worth is dependent on this job. And what happens then is, if you don't succeed in that task, that challenge, or your job is taken away, that no longer is I need a new job. That is shattering my self-worth, and I am no longer the person I thought I was. So it becomes so important to sort of layer up this emotional intelligence. And for me, that foundation is the self-belief.
Yeah.
There's an interesting piece that both we've been talking about there on this idea of being brought in to affect change, whether it's functional change, whether it's cultural change. And the cultural change is a very interesting one, because, Pippa, as you've been saying, you kind of have to be, in an ideal world, you kind of already have to be aligned to that outcome, what you want to achieve. If you're brought in to say, well, I want you to enact this culture, and you're like, that is absolutely not me at all. Yes, there's a big problem there. But that is still fundamentally a thing here, isn't it? Is in product ops, we are as much about it affecting change in the way that we work, in the culture, in the behaviors that we want to see happen. If your upper leadership or business owners or wherever above you sort of says, well, no, I want this. I want them to be incredibly regimented, and I want this. I want you also to be like a drill sergeant, et cetera, et cetera. Well, yeah, but that's really not me. That's not what I believe in. You've then got a bit of a choice to say, well, actually, I need, exactly as you're saying, I need to either then change, and this becomes part of me, the job and the thing that I'm enacting becomes part of me, or not, or we need to kind of, figure something else out, whether this role is right for me or not. So I think this kind of goes out a little bit to those leaders that are saying, well, no, I want you to not bring in the culture that you think is best for this team. I want you to instill this culture, which is what I want to see happen. It's very, very different things.
Yeah, and leadership plays such a huge role, right, in that. And it's incredibly difficult to change the culture if it's not being brought in at the top. And the loved about giffgaff is the desire to move towards a product operating model came from Ash Schofield, the CEO, and he has totally been so supportive this year about everything I've been proposing to bring in. There's another thing about it as well, which obviously my job has been made so much easier by having a very supportive CEO. But there's another bit of this, which is I find myself saying quite a lot, is it's all a game. The whole thing's a game. Product's a game. I think sometimes I get a bit of an allergic reaction to the way we talk about product, because sometimes we talk about it like a religion, and it's not. It's a game. And it's a game where some people get very wealthy and win, And if we're talking about very commercial products, and then there's another part of it, which is if you want to play the game well, you need to win people over. And so you need to do a PR piece on product. And that is not evangelizing. That is showing why it's a good method, why it's a good culture, and how all these things come together. So pretty much wherever I go, one of the first things I'm doing is like, where's the product PR? What are you doing as a product team to show everybody else what you're about and why this way of working is good? And so one of the things we've done at giffgaff is we have it's called Product Operating Model in Practice, but it's been, I don't like the acronym, but it was already acronymized before I joined, which is POM in practice. And each month we get, it can be a product manager, sometimes it's a designer, sometimes it's someone else from the team, to come and share, what was the assumption, what was the hypothesis, what did they test, what was the result, what's the research they're doing at the moment, how are we introducing A/B testing into different journeys. It's really just to showcase some of the work, and it's not a demo as such. It is a bit of PR really to kind of help people understand, take something that's almost felt too abstract and bring it into, actually, we are doing some of it. It's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect, but we are doing things. And what I've noticed is that has started to build confidence in the product managers themselves, but also people around the business to say, actually, I can kind of see what we're talking about now. I see the value when we put it together. Like I said, still tons more work to do, but it is just part of that game of how are we playing it in a way that helps everyone, rather than how are we forcing it down people's throats, which can just actually create a bigger rift.
I love it. I love that Graham and I are just nodding furiously because I think both of us have done so much PR in our product ops roles and lives, right? Like I remember like halfway through my first official product ops role, I was like, hold on, I think I'm an internal influencer. Like, I think a big part of my job is going out there and advocating for this thing and why we're doing this thing and why, like, actually showing clear evidence of what positive benefit it has had to the organization. So I absolutely love this idea of product PR.
Same here. I think there's two sides to this from a product ops perspective. I think absolutely celebrating what we are doing and seeing the challenges that we have as well, and being very honest about this with kind of the wider business, because something I talk about, particularly when you've got a scaling business, when you've moved on from kind of having just one or two or three or four squads, when you then suddenly got 10, 15, 20, 50, 100, whatever, people very quickly stop recognizing those individuals and those individual contributions, and they just see product. And so in a part, I've always felt it's important from a comms perspective, for example, to be kind of fairly standardized, because to be fair, other parts of the business don't want to know, don't care, who said what and who's done what and things like that. But it is so important to still make sure that there is a human face put on product managers, designers, engineers. And so I'm very proud of what we've done at Helios, that when we do, for example, our product demos, we get everybody to involve. Engineers that are not particularly the most confident to stand up and speak, because it's important to know that these people are here and they're doing a really great job at the same time. So I think it's really, really important to still make sure that, people are still seen as people. They still have those kind of human interactions, but especially as part of a scaling business. I think as well, this thing's a lot to product operations as well, this kind of evangelizing of us, of what we're doing, to make sure everybody knows kind of this is a journey that we are on, particularly in product operations, which is all about kind of that transformation and enhancement. It is always a journey. It's not to say, well, we have come in 6 months, right, that's it, you have done perfectly, and now it's all up to shape. We need to be making sure we are showing that we are on a journey. What was it before? What is it now? What have we done in that period of time? Because that ultimately shows the value that we are bringing first and foremost. But again, bringing that human touch to it, so that those relationships and those interactions continue to build. People like people. They don't like job titles. They don't like products. They don't like brands and slogans, they interact with people. And so the more interactivity there is, the better your relationships are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, the work is done by people. And I think the thing I've always come back to is we are at work for so much of our lives. If we sleepwalk through that, or we just work so hard there is no room to be human, then I just think that's heartbreaking. And for me, I think the sort of the challenge AI poses, right? Which I had my existential crisis at the beginning of the year of what, oh my God, what is the future if everything's taken over by AI? And what I came back to is actually the core for me to being human and feeling joy and feeling part of something is a combination of connection and creativity. And so I kind of went on a bit of an exploration of how these two things interact. And each year I give myself a word, and that word is sort of how I sort of guide some of my decisions for that year. And I think it was 2 years ago now, that word for me was connection, because I felt really disconnected from things. I felt disconnected from my family because I was trying to work so much, but I also felt disconnected from the work because I wasn't doing the work I wanted to do. And so I tried to intentionally connect. And that was part of that was also connecting to the product leader community. And then what sparked off that was creativity. So part of that connection was also connecting with myself and what brings me joy. And what I found was I started to sort of connect these dots that I hadn't seen before. And I started thinking about things in a new way. And it started to give me an energy and a joy that started to sort of infiltrate my work and allowed me, with a sort of renewed vigor, to find that confidence and meaning and purpose in the work I was doing. And the more I think about that as a sort of virtuous cycle, it makes me think, well, yes, this is who we are as humans, and this is what we bring. And whilst AI comes in and hopefully takes a lot of the mindless work away, this is actually going to give us even more room to bring in that creativity and connection. So part of that, recognizing that it's people behind these products and shining a light on those people, is also to help, as a leader, help them recognize that connection will breed creativity. And again, hopefully it will snowball outward.
Wow. Wow. Who would have thought today on this pokey little podcast we would have covered so much philosophical and psychological ground. We are unfortunately out of time today, but Pippa, this has been absolutely fantastic. And we didn't really also mention as well that you are talking about this, essentially the same topic, I believe, in a week's time.
Yes.
We are recording on the 25th of November. And so in a week's time, you are at the Product Led Alliance Summit in London.
Yeah.
I think you're talking about the same sort of topic.
Yes, I'm at the CPO Summit, and that's about self-belief as the foundation for sustainable leadership. And then I'm talking about Pockets of Brilliance, which is something dear to my heart, which is really about blending emotional intelligence, all this people stuff we've talked about, plus the capabilities and the attitude towards growing our capabilities to constantly improve our product practice without beating ourselves up about doing it, as the books say.
Fabulous. Well, that's going to be absolutely brilliant to listen to as well. We are absolutely out of time today, everybody watching. I would absolutely like to thank my very special guest and good friend Pippa Topp for everything that you have shared. So the mountains of stuff that we have covered today. Please do connect with any of us on LinkedIn. And thank you to everybody listening as well. Antonio and I will look forward to welcoming you on the next episode of the Product Opscast. Thank you and goodbye, everybody.